flag. He lied to his friend about a simple thing as a contact with a gentleman with a vehicle inside a location. He said that the car was abandoned, and we all know that's not true.
Many have speculated about the ex-deputy's involvement in both the Williams case and that of Felipe Santos, a migrant worker who went missing 3 months before. Again, last seen by Deputy Calkins. There's never been enough evidence to name him a suspect, but only time will tell the ending.
Keep It Real is a weekly podcast where we present our theories of the subjects we cover based on our interest and research. Some material may be graphic and disturbing, so proceed with caution.
Hey guys, it's Ashley.
And Shy.
We're Keep It Real. And today we are covering a very disturbing case out of Florida where a couple of men went missing altogether after being last seen with the very same sheriff's deputy. And we don't like to fart around at the beginning of the episode, so let's just get straight into the details of the case.
Right.
So let's get going. So let me give you a little synopsis, and then we'll get into the details. So both Terrance Williams and Felipe Santos went missing in 3 months apart from each other, one in 2003, at the end of 2003, one in the beginning of 2004, from Naples, Florida, where multiple witnesses saw then deputy for Collier County Sheriff's Department, Steve Calkins, arrest them, and they were never seen again. It is bizarre, and so let's just get going on Felipe. So Felipe Santos, he was a 24-year-old Mexican national who he had been living illegally in Immokalee. I don't know. That's quite a name.
Yeah.
Immokalee, Florida. He was living with his wife and young daughter who had only been born 4 months prior to his disappearance. She's now 15. At the time, his wife said he was excited about being a dad, and he seemed to be super thrilled by the fact that he had just had a baby. So he had been living in Florida for 3 years prior to his disappearance. He was working as a masonry and concrete laborer, as well as working on farming that goes on in that area. And he had been sending money back to his family in Mexico during that time, during those 3 years that he'd lived there. So, he was working quite a bit. He was last seen on October 1st, 2003 at 6:30 a.m. when he was driving to work with his two brothers and was involved in a minor fender bender at the Green Tree Shopping Center in Naples, Florida. It was a very minor accident. There were no injuries. The woman that he rear-ended said that he had asked her, him and his brothers had come to her and said, please don't contact the police, that they would pay her for the whatever damages might have been incurred, but somehow the police ended up coming anyway. So Deputy Calkins arrived at the scene and cited him for reckless driving without a license or insurance, and he put him in the back of his patrol car.
And that's where he was last seen, is driving away with Officer Calkins.
Yeah.
And then from there, never seen him again.
Right. And it wasn't like they were like, oh, well, we'll forget about, He had his brothers in the car with him. Later that day, his boss contacted the county jail to post Felipe's bail, and it was discovered that he was never actually booked into jail whatsoever.
And that's because Calkins had said he was really polite and cooperative, so instead of booking him, he just dropped him off at this local convenience store, which we'll get into.
Right. The Circle K, he says, on Immokalee Road, and I'm sure that I'm saying that wrong, but, forgive me, Floridians. So he said he dropped him off at the Circle K on Immokalee Road and then drove away.
Well, and what's interesting about him saying that he was like, oh, he was polite and cooperative, I'm just going to let him go, is the other driver involved in the crash totally contradicts that, saying that Calkins was aggravated at Santos for the lack of documentation, and he had said, I'm sick of pulling over people without licenses.
Right. Which, like, we kind of discussed this, and I said, I can understand that. I have been in an accident with somebody that did not have a driver's license or insurance. It's very frustrating, for sure. But I will say, this woman thought his behavior was unprofessional enough in regard to Felipe and the way he was talking about him that she thought it was necessary to bring that up to multiple different people after his disappearance. So, take that for what you will. So it wasn't until 2 weeks later that Calkins finally submitted the incident report for Felipe altogether. So 2 weeks later.
I don't know if that's protocol. Like, don't you have to submit an incident report right away, regardless of what you do? You had pulled someone over and you had cited them for reckless driving and driving without registration licenses. So,
It doesn't seem to be that would be protocol, no.
So, yeah, I'm not a cop. I don't know their procedures, but it just is weird to me that you would take the time to cite someone like that, but then not write an incident report.
Especially when you're clearly aggravated by their lack of documentation, and there were a number of reasons for you to be able to legally take them to jail,
Right.
Anyway, since that time, the sheriff's department has changed.
And if he was so aggravated, right, and if he was so aggravated at the fact that it was just another person without a license, would you not book them? Be like, I'm sick of this. This is like the consequences. Everybody
you
take
would think
note.
So. And like I was about to say, like the sheriff's department, since this incident, has changed their protocol, and it is mandatory for anybody that you put into your vehicle, transport whatsoever, you have to document that and file a report on it. So I don't know if it was at the time, but you would think it would be,
I would think it'd be almost mandatory for almost every incident, whether or not you
Right.
put them in your patrol car or not. If you are having interaction with someone that you feel like is doing something illegal.
Yeah. I don't think
I don't know, though.
this veteran of the sheriff's department was just like Mother Teresa over here, just forgiving everybody.
No.
I don't know that Mother Teresa is the best example, but forgiving everybody for that is causing any infraction. Especially when you're clearly irritated by them, it just seems so out of line with any sort of logic whatsoever. The Santos family ended up filing a missing persons report as well as a complaint against Deputy Calkins. And on November 4th, 2003, the Collier County Sheriff's internal investigators talked to Calkins while other detectives checked the convenience store, local hospitals, and jails for Santos. And that very same day, the investigation was closed and he was cleared of any wrongdoing. So, thorough investigation.
Right. Well, what's strange, too, is his wife was never interviewed. Why would you not go to the family and question them about anything?
I don't know. And she did at the time live with him in Florida. She has since moved back to Oaxaca. I don't know how you say it. Oaxaca. I don't know how you say it. I'm sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
Mexico, but she did at the time live with him, and maybe she could. It's sad because she said that morning he had been saying that he didn't feel very well, and she had tried to get him to stay home from work, but he insisted on going. Maybe that's why he got in an accident. You know how sometimes when you're just like feeling like you got the flu or something, and you're just like foggy headed. I mean, definitely I can see how that would be the case. But anyway, he didn't speak English very well. I just can't see a situation where this officer was communicating with him so well and things were going just so grandly that he was like, I'll just let you go. I just don't. And then okay, so that's, for now, that's where we're going to stop with Felipe Santos' story. And we're going to move on to 3 months later and talk about Terrance Williams. So,
a little background. Terrence was born January 17th, 1976 in Tennessee, but had moved to Naples, Florida to be what he says closer to his mother, and he was fathered of 4 children. Really tried to look up any sort of criminal history and couldn't find anything sans a DUI that had happened in this instance.
He actually had spent a few months in prison in 1995 for a robbery conviction. Okay. It was like an 11-month sentence, but actually most of it was actually spent on probation. So he was in jail for like 3 months or so, and then 8 months of it, something like that, was what he was on probation. And like you said, he had a DUI recently to his disappearance, where he had his license suspended because of that.
Right. And so the night he went missing, January 12th, 2004,
Well, it was actually the 11th. The night of the 11th
oh,
was,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Because,
I'm not trying to be
no,
like nitpicky
yeah,
here.
you're right. No, you're right. Because he had been at a party hosted by his coworker and he couldn't find a ride to the party. And despite having a suspended license and expired registration for his car, he drove there anyway. After he didn't come back home, his roommate Jason Gonzalez became concerned and ended up emailing Williams's mother. And I'm sorry, I'm just like, who
I
emails
know.
someone's
I thought it was
mom?
interesting. I read also
What?
that she had become worried that following Monday the 12th, whenever she hadn't heard from him, because he called her nearly every day, she said.
Yeah.
And then he emailed her that he was missing, or that he hadn't come home, and she was like, oh shit, something is terribly wrong here.
Right.
This is not good. He had been working at a Pizza Hut in
Naples.
God. He was working at a Pizza Hut in Naples, and he had been living about 24 minutes away in Bonita Springs. So, like Shai just said, he drove to that party himself, even though he didn't have a license, and his registration was expired, and his license plates were expired, and his car was actually not even registered in his name because he had just recently purchased it.
This must have been a really awesome party if you could not pass it up. You're just like, I got to get there.
Well, I bet his mom said she did drive him around a lot, but like, I think he probably had just recently got the car and he was just kind of antsy to be able to go out on his own.
Yeah.
The woman whose party it was at, her name was Christina Bergman, and she said that they just sat around, drank beer, and socialized until the sun came up. And that around 6 a.m., Terrence left, and he seemed totally fine and sober. So Terrence didn't he was supposed to go to work that following day after the party, and he didn't show up for work, and he also didn't pick up his paycheck, which was waiting for him there that afternoon. So that seems to be something I would think somebody who is working a new job, only there a few weeks, they would probably be pretty antsy to get paid and wouldn't just bail out on getting their paycheck. I would assume.
Right.
That seems fairly suspicious. His roommate emailed his mother, and the Williams family called police and filed a missing persons report. They weren't informed of anything at that time, and shortly after that, his aunt was able to track his white 84 Cadillac, which had been towed from the Naples Memorial Cemetery after, quote-unquote, obstructing traffic. Mm-hmm. And then that was when they found out that the tow report had been signed by Deputy Steve Calkins, the same man who Felipe Santos was last seen with, though at the time they were not aware of this situation.
So, yeah, like you said, his car was reported abandoned, obstructing traffic, but the interviewed cemetery workers had seen Calkins actually move his car from the lot over by the side of the road, and the keys to the car were discovered on the ground next to the car.
Yeah. This is where the details start to really get muddled. So they called the Collier County Sheriff's Department, and they discovered that Calkins had neither filed an incident report or an arrest on Terrence.
Again.
So his mother contacted the cemetery, and 3 separate workers told her they witnessed him pull Terrence over sometime between 9 and 10 a.m. They saw him ask for ID, which he didn't have. Then they saw him get him out of the car, pat him down, put him in the back of his patrol car, and before driving off, he asked the cemetery employees if he could leave the Cadillac in the cemetery lot. He asked them if he could leave Terrence's car in the cemetery lot, okay?
So it was never abandoned. He had been pulled over.
No. Right. He then, Calkins, the deputy, was witnessed by the same 3 cemetery employees returning to Terrence's Cadillac between 15 and 60 minutes later. Mm-hmm. And at that point, they watched as he moved the Cadillac from the spot inside the cemetery parking lot to a spot on the side of the road just outside of the cemetery, partially obstructing the right-of-way of the road. And then they saw him, with their own eyes, leave the keys laying on the ground just outside the passenger's door, clearly setting a scene for it to appear to have been abandoned. I mean, that weird-ass behavior in itself is something to be suspicious of.
Oh, yeah.
Without any of the other information, like, what in the world would he be doing? Why did he do that? What would be the purpose of that?
Well, upon being questioned about it, Calkins claims no memory of the event, making any arrest or cars towed. And then later, when he was contacted about it, he reveals a, quote, better memory of his interaction with Williams.
Right. He also, that very day, he declined to have the tow record from the tow company, which is a standard procedure, sent to his mobile data terminal in his car computer. Okay, so that's the computer in his cop car. He declined to have it sent there and asked them to send him hard copies instead to his personal address. And I would have to assume that this was because he never actually called in or otherwise reported a traffic stop and officially reported the vehicle abandoned versus the actual situation that happened. So he was like skirting the normal procedures that would have caught him up in his lie just that alone. I mean, that is so shady. Like, that is the shadiest behavior. I just do not understand how that's not just a giant red light for that this man is doing something incredibly insidious, I would say.
Yeah.
So after he had the vehicle towed for being abandoned, he performed a warrant search for Terrence, and in the recording for the search, Terrence can be heard in the background, which means that Terrence was in the car with Calkins after he had his car towed under misrepresentation that it was abandoned. So that's slightly creepy in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that gave me a very sick feeling in my stomach.
where he was going is, I guess Williams had told him, I'm late for work at the Circle K, and asked for a ride there.
That's what he claims, which I don't believe in any whatsoever.
Was he still in his Pizza Hut outfit?
Well, I don't. It depends on, like, I guess what he wore to the party. Like, did he wear his Pizza Hut uniform to the party that he went to the night before? Because this is just that following morning as he's going home.
Right.
So he never booked Terrence. Okay, obviously he never booked Terrence into the Collier County Jail. Where was Terrence when Calkins went back to the Cadillac to move it? Where did he put him? Where was he? Was he in the car?
Patrol car?
And they just didn't see him? I'm not really sure. So after the family received these statements from multiple witnesses at the cemetery, they called the Collier County Sheriff's Department on January 16th to speak with Calkins all day long. So they called over and over and over. He wasn't on duty that day. He was eventually contacted by dispatch at the sheriff's office, and he claimed, like Shai just said, to have zero knowledge of Terrence. He had no memory of pulling him over, no memory of having a car towed that day, no memory of Terrence whatsoever. It was 4 days prior. I don't know how you cannot remember that whole situation 4 days earlier. So I'm going to read a little about what the conversation with the dispatcher. So the dispatcher says, I hate to bother you on your day off, but this woman's been calling us all day. You towed a car from Vanderbilt into 111th Monday. A Cadillac. Do you remember it? And Calkins says, no. Dispatcher says, do you remember? She said it was near the cemetery. He repeats, cemetery? Which we all know, repeating back something that somebody just said to you is a way to kind of stall the conversation so that you can think of something to say. The dispatcher then says, and the people at the cemetery are telling her you put somebody in the back of your vehicle and arrested them, and I don't show you arresting anybody. And Calkins says, I never arrested nobody. So that was his initial reaction to this whole situation.
Which technically, I guess that part's not a lie. He didn't arrest and book anyone, so
yeah, he didn't arrest anybody, but he doesn't remember anybody either. I find that to be a little suspicious. And then a few days later, his supervisors asked him to turn in an incident report, which he says he did to quote unquote cover his ass. That's it. He didn't do it because that's what he should do, but he did it to cover his ass. So his initial report stated that he came in contact with a young black man, but the encounter was so brief that he only knew his first name, which was Terrence. That's it. That's all he said.
Okay.
He says he first came in contact with him at 12:15 when he pulled him over after noticing him driving in distress, and that he followed him to the cemetery parking lot where Terrence then asked him for a ride to the Circle K because he was late for work. And let's pause this whole story here to ponder, what are the freaking chances that this man, Terrance Williams, lied about his place of work being the Circle K gas station, which just so happens to be the place where Deputy Calkins says he dropped off Felipe Santos 3 months prior, who also has disappeared. That just is a very, very unlikely coincidence. Like, really? Are we really going to say that that's what happened here? I'm like, no.
Well,
I'm telling you no.
what's like super kind of creepy is that the surveillance footage from the Circle K shows no evidence of Calkins' story.
Yeah, there's not any video of him pulling into the station lot at that time at all. He's okay. So first of all, let's talk about the fact that Terrence could have been cited for 6 different moving violations at the time that he was pulled over. Suspended license, no registration. It's actually registered to somebody else. The license plates were expired. There was a few more that I can't even remember, but just those 3 alone would be motivation for him to be taken to jail, to be arrested and taken to jail. And this guy is like claiming he's such a altruistic cop that he's like just letting everybody go.
I feel like I would get pulled over and like get a ticket for doing 1 mile over, you know? Like, cops aren't that forgiving.
No, right. And Calkins claims that he obliged because Terrence looked nice and clean cut.
Coming from a party?
Right. And as Calkins later explained, Williams was very clean cut. That's one of the reasons I helped him. Outside of his long dreadlocks, I mean, he seemed to be a very clean young man, a very respectful of me and very well spoken, which, like, sorry, but that whole thing just drips with racism. Yep. Sorry, but it does. And for the record, he didn't work at the Circle K gas station anyway.
Calkins had claimed that he used his work-issued cell phone to call the Circle K to confirm employment, but there was no evidence on the cell phone record showing that the call was ever made.
Right, and none of the employees remembered getting a call from the deputy that day. He said that Terrence told him to go back to his car and he would be able to find his registration in the glove compartment, to which that's when he went back to his car, and when he opened the glove compartment, there was nothing in there. He said he felt duped, and that made him angry, and that's why he went and called the gas station to see if he could talk to Terrence, but obviously there's no record of that actually happening. Okay, that's the other thing. If he didn't arrest him and he wasn't doing anything, and he was just taking him to work because he was so forgiving and this guy was so clean-cut and well-spoken, why is it even necessary for him to go back to his car to look for the registration to begin with?
Right.
And how often do cops just let people go on good faith? You know, it doesn't happen. They're not like, oh, I'll go back later after I drop you off and go check in your car and see if you... I mean, that is just total BS. Okay, so then he says he called in the license plate and found the license was expired. However, further investigation into phone and surveillance showed that his story didn't actually match up at all with anything that he had said. Like Shai just said, there was no video of him at the Circle K gas station in the parking lot at that time. And although there was a press release by the sheriff's department that stated that there was no record or witnesses placing either Calkins or Williams at the Circle K that day, there was a worker at the Circle K that had another version of events, which she told in a press interview. This witness is 52-year-old Jesusa Ibarra, a clerk at the Circle K. She said both Terrence and Calkins were both in the store the morning of January 12th, but they did not appear to be together. She said Calkins used the restroom and Terrence filled a small gas can and walked down Wiggins Pass Road completely alone. She says that Terrence was a regular customer at Circle K and he would come in regularly to buy cigarettes before going to work at the nearby Pizza Hut. She also said, I know Terrence went down the road and then we saw the picture and said, no way, it's scary. You see this person right in front of you, 2 seconds, and now he's been missing for 2 years at the time that she gave the statement. You know, I talked to you about this yesterday. I'm like, was this encounter like the first time that Calkins saw Terrence? Was he like, oh, this guy ran out of gas and I'm going to go follow him? Was he just following him there? You know, like what did he, I have no idea.
Well, given his past comments and the fact that he referred to Williams' car as a homie Cadillac,
yeah,
I feel like he is a bit racist and is kind of picking out minorities. Yeah, and profiling for sure.
I mean, it's just really creepy to think that they were actually in there at the same time. This lady remembers that, but it's not in the situation that this Calkins is claiming.
So, do you think the Circle K is like his spot to find people to?
Well, maybe, but the one that he dropped off Felipe at was actually a different one, like a little bit,
Like 4 miles away.
yeah. But maybe it's like maybe he trolls gas stations for people that he seems to have a vendetta against. So,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I mean, we'll get into theories, though. It's hard to say. At this point, Marsha Williams, Terrence's mom, filed a complaint against Deputy Calkins, saying there were several reasons to take Terrence to jail. No driver's license, no license plate. He's not telling the truth, which is totally, absolutely, 100% correct. She says Terrence was in near daily contact with her before his disappearance, and he had never gone this long without contacting her at all. They spent Sundays together nearly every weekend, and many of his personal belongings were left behind at her home. Okay, so here's where we're getting into some even more inconsistencies in this guy's story. So further suspicion into Calkins was raised when a recording of his call to dispatch requesting the tow of Terrence's car revealed further conflicting statements. In this recording, Calkins described the caddy as an abandoned vehicle and blocking the road. And this statement on the recording contradicted both his incident report and the witness's statements that Calkins himself had moved the car onto the side of the road from the parking lot where he'd pulled over. On the recording, Calkins says, the tag comes back to nothing. It's a big old white piece of junk Cadillac. I'm towing it. After reading the dispatcher the VIN number, Calkins predicted it's going to come back to one of the brothers in Fort Myers. And also in the recording, he is joking with the dispatcher saying, maybe he's out there in the cemetery. He'll come back and his car will be gone.
That's creepy to me. I'm sorry. That is ominous. That he's,
Yeah.
oh, maybe he's out in the cemetery. Like, is he though?
Yeah. I hope not. He is also heard calling the car a homey Cadillac, like Shai said, and he spoke an exaggerated black dialect, very different from the way he actually spoke. He later defended the way he spoke on the call, saying that he was just joking around with a friend, although admitted that it was in poor taste. Yeah. And then the corporal who was running the plates on the recording for Calkins admitted to poor judgment, and he said that this kind of conversation had just kind of become an ongoing thing with us, and unfortunately I got caught on tape saying that, which I was like, excuse me, first of all, it's interesting that you're regretful not of the way that you were talking, but the fact that you got caught on tape doing it. That to me is indicative of a further reaching problem in the department, I would say. The fact that you're openly saying to the public, I regret I got caught talking that way on tape.
That's really crappy.
That's like one of those apologies that's really just kind of like, I'm sorry that you found this to be hurtful.
Right.
Not giving me a lot of hope about this whole police department or sheriff's department. He also claimed, Calkins, that he was trying to help the towing company by moving the car and not attempting to make it appear abandoned. Okay, dude, sure. I'm sure you were doing that. I'm sure you really care to take time out of your day to help the towing company. Like,
right.
Really, besides the fact that it totally contradicts what actually happened. Okay, so that 20 minutes later, at 1:12 p.m. is when Calkins requested the background check on a Terrance Williams. He gave his full name, which contradicts the first statement where he said he barely even got his name in his contact with him. Giving an inaccurate birth date, which is the birth date that Terrence would sometimes give police when he was trying to get out of trouble. So it wasn't his actual birth date. It was a separate birth date that I don't know how he would know that, because it's not on his license, it's not on anything. It's only the birth date that Terrence would sometimes give police when he was trying to evade getting in trouble.
Right.
So he had to have gotten that birth date from Terrence, period. Then, as we already kind of talked about, a new lead opened up in the case when the Mexican consulate in Miami contacted Marsha Williams and said that there were that they were looking for a man who had gone missing under eerily similar circumstances, which was obviously Felipe Santos. So, now we have two men where the sheriff's deputy is the last person to have seen them both. Both of them were last seen getting put into the back of his vehicle, and his stories could not stay straight to save his life. I just can't even.
He's just kind of like throwing together stories it's like when you have to tell a lie, then you have to keep telling other weird lies to cover up that, and just like,
Yeah.
there's no end to it until you get caught.
But it's almost bizarre how inconsistent they were.
Yeah.
Like, it frightens me, and I mean, we'll talk about it in theories, but it frightens me that he didn't even really seem to care enough to try to keep his story straight or have a legitimate
Yeah.
story. Like, you know, like you're seriously telling your superiors, like, well, I just took him to the Circle K. I just dropped him off at, like, what? Truly, it's mind-blowing. It's like, it's either he is an idiot beyond idiots, or he absolutely thought, I'm not going to get in trouble for these minorities' arrests, like, or going missing. Like, what difference is it going to make? That's just, to me, it's like one or the other. There's really not a lot of leeway on what possibly he was thinking there. So because the main person of interest in the case was a police officer, the FBI and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement were called in on the case. And this is months later, and weeks after Terrance's disappearance, and months later after Felipe's. So it's not like this has been investigated in a timely manner, when we all know, surely, all listening to this podcast, we all know the first few hours, days are the most vital in getting information, evidence, everything.
The fact that it took like 2 weeks for him to be told by like his supervisors, hey, you need to do something. That's like, what is this department even doing with their life?
Well, that's exactly. So, and we'll get further into that in a minute, because it's definitely questionable, just the whole thing. So, various investigative techniques were used, including the covert placement of GPS on Calkins' vehicle, as they were hoping, after they put this GPS on his car, months and weeks later, that he might go back to the scene of the crime where maybe he left their bodies, and they would be able to track that back to him, but they could not, because he didn't go anywhere. And they also did a forensic investigation of the patrol car where they were looking for blood. They supposedly used a cadaver dog and could find no signs of a body being in the car. Again, this is after the incidents took place, so it's not necessarily indicative of anything, as he may not go back to the scene of the crime, whatever crime may have taken place, and where he may have disposed of the bodies. And, it's just, it just is like a little too little too late here. He also refused to speak to a federal grand jury in 2004. He refused to do this. I mean,
if you have nothing to hide, why would you just do it?
Right.
And if you're innocent and you had no like shady underhead things going on, you should have no problem.
Right. And he
clearing your name.
He wants to cry that it's like a witch hunt, and he's like, "Meh, I'm a scapegoat," but he doesn't want to do as much as he can to help clear his name in this. Okay. So he was initially placed on administrative leave for health reasons. I did air quotes there, but no one listening knows that, but okay, health reasons unrelated to the disappearances. But he was later terminated in September of 2004 after a polygraph test showed that he lied when he gave the statement that he did not see Terrance Williams again after dropping him off at the Circle K, which we all know that polygraphs, it's not admissible in court. You might be able to convince yourself of your lie and believe it, and then you still would pass, but he failed it. So it's just another little bit of evidence against him. And also, he was fired for giving contradictory statements in both the missing person cases and for not cooperating with the investigations. Again, if you didn't do anything wrong, why are you not cooperating at all? Why are you not giving testimony at a grand jury trial? Why are you being absolutely resistant to any of this stuff that would help clear your name if, in fact, you did nothing wrong? It's
strange.
Totally bizarre. He asked the agency to reconsider his firing, saying that he was on medication for stress, anxiety, and depression, and that a psychologist said that he was burnt out, overwhelmed, under considerable stress at home and work. In a press interview, he said the following: "Part of me wants to stay here and go back to work and show my innocence, and part of me wants to go back to the Midwest and get the hell out of here." I was like, what? Does that alone not tell you that why would you need to get the hell out of there if you didn't do anything wrong? That's like one of those, what are those statements called?
Guilty admission?
Yeah. Hello. He just wants to run away. And also the whole, like, the psychologist said he was burnt out, overwhelmed, under considerable stress. Are you trying to help the prosecutor in your future case or what? Like,
Yeah.
you're making a case for yourself that you were, like, at a breaking point and decided to possibly do something out of character. I mean, I really find that to be so bizarre. Really bizarre.
If you're feeling that way and you're in this position, this is your career, like you're in a power authority, take time off, go do something relaxing, talk to your supervisors, and because I'm pretty sure they offer free counseling for these people.
Yeah.
So I don't see it being that way. I just think he was a scumbag.
Right. I mean, it's really weird. It's really, really suspicious. He remains a person of interest in the case, but has never been charged with a crime. And he has since moved to Iowa, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where he's just living his life. When he was asked to explain the two cases, he told the Naples Daily News that it was a coincidence extreme, and that's all it is. It was just bad luck. It was bad luck. I didn't think anything of it. Okay, so I looked into it a little bit. All I could find in his, like, personnel file, it says that he had a lot of positive evaluations from the past 17, I believe, years that he had been working for the sheriff's department from his superiors. Which, depending on what this sheriff's department, how they conduct themselves, that doesn't say a lot to me. But there was also one report stating that he was cited for unprofessional behavior towards citizens, and that he had to receive counseling for that behavior that he exhibited towards citizens. So there's one maybe little red mark that might kind of be a good example of the way he conducted himself with people that he may not have seen it appropriate to give any sort of respect whatsoever.
Well, does being under stress and being burnt out and all this, like, does that warrant you talking with your friends and other coworkers in such a manner that you have to publicly apologize for?
Right. Yeah. You wouldn't think so.
No.
Yeah. You wouldn't think so. And I mean, I know that, like, friends, say stuff to each other sometimes that maybe they wouldn't say in front of other people, but at the same time,
he's a cop.
Yeah, you're a police officer. You're being recorded. I don't know. It's really very strange to me that I'm wondering what in the hell did they say to each other off recordings, and how did they conduct themselves when they weren't being taped? If that's the way they reacted when they were, that's pretty troubling. So, yeah, like I said, they closed the FDLE opened a case and closed it the same day for lack of evidence. And like we said earlier, that was a great, thorough investigation. The former Collier County Sheriff at the time, Don Hunter, he says that we all believe, as you do, that there are too many inconsistencies and too many coincidences. The difficulty was that we had to prove it, and they had difficulty doing that. He's the same one that initially he had said that both the men had reason to run off to avoid legal issues to CNN. So, I mean, I get it. Like, I get at the initial outset, maybe you're like, well, they do have criminal histories. They're both committing some illegal acts at the time that they were pulled over. I can see where you're coming from, but at the same time, his statements have all changed completely, and now he's like, "Oh, there's too many inconsistencies, too many coincidences. We just had trouble proving it." I'm like, how hard did you really try? It doesn't seem like you really tried that hard. He also says, "I think these comments could be expected of Mr. Calkins. Certainly, he's bitter about his career. However, the public trust is preserved because of our actions, both as it regards to Mr. Calkins and as it regards to the investigations of missing persons," Hunter said. So, in my opinion, all he's done here is try to cover his department and his ass.
Mm-hmm.
He just said the public trust is preserved. How, dude? Like, you were running a department that, like,
No, I think it ruins the trust even more. There's no consequences that this guy really had to face other than getting fired, but...
Exactly. It's pretty horrifying. To this day, Collier County states that in addition to their sheriff's office, the FBI and the U.S. Attorney General's office, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and the state's attorney office are all involved in the investigation. They have chased more than 24 tips from Florida to Kansas to Canada. Like I said earlier, since both men's cases, the sheriff's office has changed its policies, and deputies that are on patrol are now required to let dispatchers know anytime they're transporting someone in their patrol cars.
Well, and I don't think it's a bad idea to they all wear like chest cams or
Oh yeah, body cams.
body cams. Yeah.
I don't even know if we do that in Florida. I don't even know.
I don't know.
We're like, it's Florida, so who knows? So the CUE, Center for Missing Persons, a national missing persons nonprofit organization, has conducted multiple searches, has advocated for the cases, and has held meetings and events with law officials over the years. In January 2013, Tyler Perry offered a $100,000 reward in both Terrence and Felipe's cases in regard to tips that lead to the men, their remains, or clues that crescendo to an arrest in the case.
This whole thing was being covered, too, by the show Disappeared, which is good.
Yeah, I love that show.
Anderson Cooper 360, Dateline NBC, Investigation Discovery. So it was getting a lot of coverage and media.
This is after, it was after the,
like 12 years,
this
yeah,
is
like
10
12
years
years
later,
or something,
essentially. Yeah.
10, 12.
Because as we know, the truth about it is that when minorities are either missing or murdered, the coverage of that in national media isn't as prolific, I guess, as it would be for a white person. The one man wasn't even a legal resident either, so he's not going to be blasted on milk cartons. And Perry said that he was told by other media outlets that Williams was not sympathetic enough a figure to receive coverage because he had a prison record, had 4 children by 4 different women, and, whatever. I understand, like, he wasn't a model citizen, but it doesn't matter. Like, your life is not does not directly correlate to like how much of a stand-up citizen that you are. You don't deserve to live longer because you have 4 kids by the same woman, or you haven't had past legal problems.
And you just never, like, maybe he was really trying to turn his life around. You don't know that. It's not like he was a child rapist.
Right, exactly. And his mother does say that he was trying to turn his life around. He got that job, but he was trying to make his life better and have enough money so that he could pay his child support and take care of his legal issues. She said she doesn't have much of a support system in Florida since her family lives in Tennessee, but she feels tethered to the area now because Terrence disappeared from that place, which I can understand. That I've heard that from other missing people's families.
Yeah.
During the press conference with Tyler Perry, there was a man, Anthony Denson Jr., who said between sobs that he knew Terrance Williams and had his own encounter with Deputy Calkins back in 1997. He said that Calkins and 3 other deputies chased him on the beach and that they were going to kill him. I don't know, again, if that's even true or not.
How, I mean, maybe I can see them chasing him down and apprehending him, but
I don't really understand. I don't know. It was just one example of somebody that had contact with this deputy. But who knows if that's true. Like it happened at the press conference, so I wonder if he wanted to perhaps get in on some of that reward money and give a little bit of info. I don't know. He did, like I said to you yesterday, he did seem very genuine and he was like sobbing his eyes out, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's telling the truth. To this day, both cases remain open and active, and in September of this very year, a civil lawsuit was filed on behalf of the victims' families. Benjamin Crump, the civil rights attorney filing on behalf of Terrance Williams' family, said the legal filing was a culmination of over a decade of investigative work, was filed in conjunction with the Collier County Sheriff's Office, and would compel Calkins to explain his actions in a formal deposition, which is something he refused to do, 15 years ago. He says, the last person to be with them that anybody witnessed was the then Collier County Sheriff's Deputy Calkins. These 2 young men disappeared off the face of the earth, and the last man to see them was this deputy. His stories were so inconsistent, so unbelievable, and even though he had all these inconsistencies, there were no charges brought. This lawsuit is going to formally say what people for the last 14 years have been informally saying, that he intentionally murdered Terrance Williams and Felipe Santos. The lawsuit states that Terrance Williams is dead, and his death was caused by Calkins' wrongful acts constituting a violation of his rights. Calkins, in response, mailed a one-page response denying each claim and requesting a jury trial. Crump's firm says they are in the early stages of discovery and are looking forward to moving forward with the case. So a statistic that I read regarding missing persons in this country that was freaking staggering is according to the National Crime Information Center in 2017, there were 651,226 missing persons files filed with the NCIC. Like, is this for real? Some of those may be just have run off on their own, some of them, but like 650,000 people filed as missing persons. That is frightening altogether.
Yeah. Well, and like how many of them are just immigrants, or like we've talked about like the homeless population and how like a lot of those people don't even go reported missing.
Right.
You know, that's just who's being reported.
Right, exactly. So what happened here? So some extenuating circumstances of this case. So 2 days after Terrance went missing on January 14th, he had a warrant put out for his arrest in Tennessee for failure to pay child support after not showing up for a court hearing that day. It was stated that if he failed to appear in court in Hamilton County, Tennessee, he would have to spend 60 days in jail and pay a $5,000 fine. At the time, the spokesperson for the sheriff's department stated it was possible he was on the run from this warrant. But let's not forget all that shady shit that went down with Calkins and his story. There is no way that you can just say, oh, he was due in court and he didn't show up. So all this stuff that absolutely sounds totally insane from Deputy Calkins doesn't come into play. You know, it is a circumstance that you have to take into consideration. Like, there is a slight possibility that maybe he was trying to escape that situation, but that's why he moved to Florida also. And I'm not sure why he would have moved to Florida and then went on the run even further, you know. But
well, Florida is a non-extraditive state, so he can't be picked up there and
taken to Tennessee.
Yeah, he can't. Yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting bit of information. I didn't read that. So let's get into why. Or talk about why did Calkins not come up with a plausible cover story other than dropping both men at a Circle K gas station? Okay, if he killed the men, wouldn't logic dictate that he would already have come up with a good cover story? You would think. I mean, It kind of makes me wonder if he didn't, like I said to you yesterday, if he didn't actually mean to kill them, or he didn't physically murder them, but maybe he did something unlawful with them or to them, and he wasn't expecting to have to answer to anyone about it. Like, he thought maybe this was a pattern of his behavior. Maybe he's done this before, where he picks somebody up who he doesn't think has any familial connections, isn't going to have anybody coming back at him asking where they are, or this person themselves wouldn't come back at him with any sort of legal recourse because they were committing an illegal act at the time.
Well, and it could be too, like, his behavior just escalating. Like, maybe he got away with something small and he's like, well, nobody said anything. And then he started developing this desire to do something worse. And he figured, hey, why not take the chance? It seems that nobody cares what I do anyway.
Right. And like he stated himself, he was stressed out. He was super stressed out at the time. So maybe that like made him break and he did this. You know, the one thing that I've read about, you know, as far as like if he's maybe a serial killer, for example, that if the escalation doesn't usually happen in such quick succession. Right. The fact that it was 3 months apart, but maybe he just got a frenzy.
An urge.
You know, like he just couldn't resist. There is a horrible, I don't want to say it's phenomena, but it's like a horrible history, I guess you might say, of certain law enforcement agencies doing what they call moonlight tours, where they would pick somebody up and take them super, super far away and just abandon them. This is documented in history. It's happened.
This is creepy.
Creepy?
Yeah, it's creepy to me.
It's something that has been documented big time in Canada, which they call them their like starlight tours with Indigenous individuals. They would pick up like drunk Indigenous individuals, drop them off in the middle of nowhere, and it would be literally like 20 below zero, and a lot of these men ended up dying. But also, and like, you know, I'm not saying that we're back in the civil rights era, but during the civil rights era, police officers would often detain people trying to register either black citizens to vote or protesters by driving them deep into rural areas that were predominantly white or had high Klan activity. And there are rumors from people in the area that this kind of thing still goes on. And this is from multiple, and I know it's just hearsay, but it's from multiple residents who have lived in the Naples area for 20 plus years. And in these moonlight tours, starlight tours, victims were vulnerable people that would usually not be able to take recourse, as it would draw attention to them and they were already in legal trouble. For like we already talked about, Terrence was driving with suspended license, suspended plates, outdated registration, outdated plates, and Felipe was an illegal immigrant driving without a license. An area very, very, very close to this incident was the Picayune Strand State Park. It's in Collier County. It's 30 miles east of Naples. It's 78,000 acres of forest consisting primarily of cypress swamps, wet pine flatwoods, and wet prairies. So you might say a pretty perfect place to dispose of a body or an individual in, you know, would they ever really be able to search all of that area well enough to find two bodies?
Who wants to search a swamp, honestly?
Right. I mean,
they're gross.
I just
full of gross things.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't. It's just so. To me, it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Like, there's a place just nearby, 30 minutes away, that you can dispose of a body without pretty much anybody ever finding. 78,000 acres. Like, you're not going to be able to on foot, just trudge through and find every body. That's why I'm like, who knows how many people has this happened to? This is, again, hearsay. I'm not saying this is absolute fact, but I found a lady online who said she commented on Terrance Williams' Facebook page with this story, saying maybe what happened to me could shed some light on where to start looking for these two. She also has contacted the sheriff's department and the FBI with her story. She says, okay, so I'm going to read it. I mean, I'm not saying this is fact, but this is just one woman's experience according to her. She says that when I was in school in Florida years ago, I was pulled over for supposedly running a stop sign. The cops had been following me for at least 3 streets before pulling me over. The situation went from, "What's the problem, officer?" to me being called the N-word and being maced through the window of my Suzuki X90 for not getting out of the car. I could not understand why 2 police officers were asking me to get out of my car for running a stop sign. When I asked what the problem was again, I was told that the problem was that I wouldn't get out of my car. I then asked if we could at least go to a well-lit area, first pointing, because it was at night, first pointing to a nearby gas station, like I was told to do at a seminar at Bethune-Cookman College. She says, at this time, I was on my university cheerleading squad, the girls' soccer team, and I worked 2 jobs on campus and off campus. I barely had money to pay for school and living, let alone food, so I was no more than about 107 pounds back then. There were no drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, or even energy drinks involved, and it was a school night. She says, the next thing I knew, I was being maced through the window and yelled at. The officers reached into my car, unlocked the door, and continued spraying me from head to toe with mace while calling me an effing N-word. Once they got me out of my seatbelt, they roped, not handcuffed, but roped my hands and feet together, then threw me in the back seat of the police car. This happened maybe around 10:20ish p.m., yet I did not arrive at the police station until around 4 a.m.
Holy moly.
I know. Within that time, the cops drove me from wooded areas to junkyards, telling people at these places I got one. Then the people at these junkyards and wooded areas would look at me in the back seat. In one of the wooded areas, I remember being taken out of the car and put over the backside of a lawn chair and sprayed in the face with a hose to get some of the mace out of my eyes. This was close to when I was taken to the station. This entire time, the officers asked me whose car I was driving. It was mine. They asked me what I was on probation for. I wasn't. They asked me what priors I had. I had no priors. I kept begging to go to the police station and praying out loud. I didn't understand why this was happening, and I thought I was going to die. If my experience back then could help anyone selfishly, it would make me feel some sense of justice regarding me not feeling empowered to do something about the two cops that did that to me. Can you imagine how many people this has happened to over the years and they just haven't spoken up about it like me out of fear, lack of support, and or resources, or maybe not wanting to be the first one, only one? I am sincere about wanting to help, and I am willing to open my record for review if they think it will help. I only opened this Facebook profile so I could reply to this story. That sounds freaking terrifying. Whether it's true or not, she does seem genuine. Obviously, it's just a person on Facebook. Like, how are we really going to ever find out that, if she actually had this experience or not? But I'm not kidding that when I say that I saw a lot of stories like that when I was looking into this. People, when they would read about what happened, they would say, this happened to me, or something eerily similar happened to me. I never said anything about it because I didn't know who I could talk to about it to, and who would believe me. And I was also scared out of my wits, which I can say, I personally am a white gal, and I am scared shitless if I get pulled over. I want to freaking die.
Well, even a cop turns out behind you. You instantly are just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Am I doing 36 and the 35?
Right.
What's going to happen?
I know. I mean, it's scary. and the sheriff's, we know of sheriff's departments, at least a couple, that they have some of the most corrupt situations going on. And I am just saying, I don't have hard evidence that this whole department was corrupt or anything, but it seems fairly suspicious that this man was the last person seen with either men that has completely disappeared, and nothing really came of it. And for quite a while, they were trying to just say that these men ran off. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. So so in the end, this is a real tragedy for both families, but also for the citizens of Collier County as a whole, I would say. The sheriff's department initially denied that there was anything suspicious that occurred with the deputy Calkins, and tried to place the blame on the men and their criminal histories, saying that they ran to escape the law. And it wasn't until the evidence was overwhelming that Calkins had repeatedly lied, refused to help the investigation, and his stories didn't add up in the least. And these things became clear to the public and the victims' families that Sheriff Hunter and the department began to act as though Calkins had done something wrong. It was only then that they did. Unfortunately, he was merely fired and not more thoroughly investigated or charged with any crimes, likely because in the important investigation time frame, in those crucial moments just after these men disappeared, he was allowed to evade the investigation, and those moments were lost forever. The fact that another officer in the department admits that there was an ongoing air of racism in the department and openly stated that he didn't regret the behavior, but that he regretted that he was caught doing it, is definitely suspicious and indicates to me that there was a pervasive issue throughout the department and their handling of cases involving minorities, that they were outright discriminatory, and they did not think that there was anything wrong with that in the least. So, what does that say about how thoroughly they investigated these acts? About, I think we can kind of see that, about what they knew had gone on until one of these individuals' families didn't just let the situation die. And now they seem to just be trying to make it appear that they were a wholesome, well-to-do department and everything, they had no involvement in any of this kind of shady behavior.
I'm sorry. If one of your employees, I just don't see how they had a completely blind eye or no clue
Right.
that,
It's almost impossible unless he was just so freaking smart and sneaky. But as we saw, he's really not. He's really not that brilliant. He's really not that sneaky. He got caught in a lie the minute somebody's family came out and said, wait a second, this isn't adding up, What did Sheriff Hunter and the Collier County Sheriff's Department know about Deputy Calkins and other officers and their treatment towards minorities? What did they know before this? Probably a lot. There were likely more victims of this department that may have survived or may have not had family members who knew any details to push further, victims who may have been too afraid to seek any recourse. I mean, luckily in this situation, Terrence's mother would not let the situation just fade away, and it was brought to light, and that is the only reason that we even know that this has gone on. Unfortunately, that has not brought her any answers up to this point. And, somebody needs to be a voice for the victims of this type of injustice. Police should not have free rein to take someone's life into their own hands because they deem them unworthy of life and justice and freedom. That's not how this country works. Like I said, it's just a fact that minorities do not receive as much attention in the media for disappearances and murders as white folks do. And especially when the minorities have a criminal history and are not exactly pillars in the communities in which they lived.
Right.
Having a criminal history does not make a human being unworthy of life, justice, or media coverage in regards to the disappearance and possible murders. And, we are here to call these situations out, to keep the light on them, and to make sure that these types of depraved individuals, such as Deputy Calkins, cannot continue to perpetuate this type of behavior without consequence. Terrence and Felipe are now added to a sadly growing list of individuals who we will continue to seek information about and continue to push for justice in their disappearances. If you have any information regarding the whereabouts of Felipe Santos or Terrance Dion Williams, please contact the Black and Missing Foundation's confidential tip line or the Collier County Sheriff's Department, which I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. Or the Southwest Florida Crime Stoppers at 1-800-780-TIPS. That's 1-800-780-TIPS. So, unfortunately, I can't wait to hear the developments of this civil suit that has been brought against Calkins. Obviously, they're just getting their evidence and whatnot all collected. So surely in the next year that you will probably hear some more about what happens further in this case. But as it stands, there's not a lot of closure for anybody.
I feel like he just needs to admit to it, and I can't imagine living my life constantly having to watch my back, look over my shoulder, and worry about if I was going to get caught doing something.
Right.
It's just,
I know.
Just admit it, man.
Right. I would hope you could. I would hope that you would have. But you know what? If he is a sadistic serial killer, which is definitely possible. Obviously, we have no evidence to show that he's done this to anyone else or that. Because did we even talk about? Yeah, we talked about them getting dropped off. Maybe people got dropped off and made their way back home, and they were scared out of their mind that that would happen again, or something worse would happen. Maybe people died. We don't know. Did Calkins take them out to the Everglades and shoot them? Is it the Everglades? Or am I just saying that? Okay. And shoot them in the head or whatever, or shoot them in a giving them a fatal injury where maybe they could have survived if they had access to medical treatment, but left them
not
out.
Surrounded by crocodiles and alligators.
Right. Left them out in the swamp to fend for themselves, and then they died. Because I don't think that the fact that there was not any like cadaver hits on his car really says anything. Like or blood, they looked for blood. You know, it's like, well, first of all, that took place quite a while ago. And then also, he could have taken them out of the car and shot him, like, or left him or done anything. It's definitely possible that and likely that he wasn't going to kill them in his cop car, you know? He took them somewhere and killed them. I don't know for sure, but I would say, in my opinion, that's a pretty 98% chance. Sure, he did that. Yeah.
Well, and like you were saying, what better place to drop a body or a person? And like I said, there's animals out there that I was telling you, like crocs and gators, they love rank, stanky meat.
Yeah.
The heat of that place would make a body decompose way fast and it'd be smelly. So, and then like not to mention all the little critters, the elements, like there's places in, I'm assuming a swamp where the mud is so thick and just sucks anything that comes in contact with it up into the ground. Like, are dogs even able to smell past all this nasty swamp smells?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, in 78,000 acres of this national park, for example, nearby, that's a butt ton of acreage to have a dog search. There's just no way that they can even do that. And we know that like rain can completely wipe away a scent. So what does the swamp, what would a swamp do to it? And, you know, they said they searched with helicopters.
Well, okay, but
he could have killed them and tied their bodies to some brick. I mean, it's possible that it's so unfortunate, but it's definitely possible that these men their bodies may never be found unless, I know that like him having to go to trial, he's going to have to give his story. He's going to have to give a story. Right. They're going to bring up, wait a second, why did you say this? Which he blames because he was taking medication and stuff, which I'm like, if your medication is seriously causing you to not remember 4 days prior, then I'm really worried about your being able to conduct yourself in your
like, then don't
job.
go to work.
Yeah, exactly. So very, very troubling all around. And again, it's one of those cases where it's like, I wish there was closure to this, but I hope,
unfortunately,
I hope that the civil lawsuit brings at least some answers for the families of Felipe and Terrence, and it's not just this never-ending what happened to my family member. It's so sad. I read like his mother had him when she was 16, and when he was 3, his father left, and it was just him and his mom this whole time, and they were still super close. And she's just like, you know, as much as people want to tell her he just ran off to escape the law, she's like, he would never have done this, and he would never have done this and then not at least called to say, hey, I'm okay, like, you know, I'm alive. He wouldn't do that to her. She was all he had, family-wise, really.
And she seems to know him best, so I don't really see for her like making up like, oh, he's my baby. He would
I just think so.
He would never do this.
I mean, we know family members do tend to not want to see their family member in that kind of light, but she openly admits like he had a past, he had some legal problems, he had definitely gotten behind on child support and like was having legal issues at the very time this happened because of that. But that does not, she was like, that is not where he was headed. He was trying to straighten up, turn his life around. He was trying to, you know, work steadily. He was working. And again, is he going to disappear and not at least get that last paycheck, which he had worked for?
Needed?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And, you know, and Felipe Santos had a newly born daughter, was very like happy, was supporting his family back home. You know, they have never seen him.
Yeah, I was going to say, he was sending money back to Mexico, so it's not like he was just,
like,
I don't know. He just seemed like he wanted to be a family man. Like, he wanted to be there,
right.
not
and his
run
family in
away from
Mexico
it.
hasn't heard a peep from him since either. So, and like he was, he was supporting them greatly with the money that he was making. So I don't think that it really lines up with logic to say that all of a sudden he just decided to stop, drop it all, leave his wife, leave his daughter, and go make, a life for himself somewhere else. It just does not logically make sense. And, you would have to be literally a lunatic to hear all the facts of this case and tell me that former deputy Steven Calkins didn't have something to do with these men's disappearances. You literally would have to be a lunatic. So if you are, let me know. I'd love to hear it, because I want to hear the logistical gymnastics that you're trying to perform to make that the case. Anyway, so yeah, I can't wait to bring update on this story as far as the legal proceedings go for the civil trial, because I really do. I mean, I really hope that maybe they're going to be able to just like catch him up in his lies in a way that is they put more pressure on him than the police department, because they don't want to that sheriff's department doesn't want to look bad either,
Right. No, because like I said, how could they have had all this happening right under their nose? And I mean, more than once too. They had to have, when someone calls and, I don't know, I just feel like there should have been more like disciplinary actions taken for him not filing the appropriate incident reports, not booking these people who were breaking the law.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, and like there is apparently a saying among police that coincidences don't happen or something like that.
Interesting.
This case is just supposedly, according to Calkins, it's just one giant coincidence.
I don't think so.
But I'm like, no, I don't think so either. So anyway, I'm really glad that we found out about this case, that we covered it, and like I said, super anxious to hear any further information about it. Oh, now Peter's home. So I guess you got it right. I thought so. So anyway, that is it for now on Felipe and Terrence. I hate when I say it like that. I'm like Terrence and Felipe. It kind of sounds like Terrence and Philip. Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's not funny. I know, but that is kind of funny.
Yeah.
So back when South Park was funny.
Seriously.
But anyway, yeah. So we'll be done for now. Thanks for listening.
Tell us what you think about this case.
Yeah.
Let us know.
We'd love to hear your opinions. If you have any information that we somehow didn't find, I would love to hear it, because, I mean, we were scouring the depths of the internet for information on this. I
don't think until they take this dude, to court and do this trial, we're not going to know.
No.
Like
not anything real substantial.
Yeah.
So, okay. I would love also to hear from you, aside from this case, about anything. If you have any suggestions for us, any words of encouragement, anything at all, just remember to email us at creepitrealpod@gmail.com. What other stuff do we have? All those other things.
Don't forget our Patreon. We have 2 different tiers of listener levels, support levels. They come with different incentives and things like that. So
I think we have 15 as it stands. So not bad in like the couple weeks that we've been up and running on Patreon.
Yeah. My friend Amber tried to become one last night, and it flagged her credit card. So she said once it clears, she will become a patron. So thank you, Amber.
Actually, I'm going to run down and say thank you to our current Patreon patrons. So I want to thank. So this is in the past 2 weeks. We have Valeska, Tiffany, Sonia, Say, Morgan, Molly, Kiana, Kelly, Katie Jo, Jill, Grace, Emily, Cass, Carmen, and Anna. So thank you guys so much for supporting us. And anyway, our Patreon is patreon.com/creepitrealpod. Honestly, the only reason that we were able to get a design that was able to go on merchandise and shirts and whatnot, and the only reason that we were able to actually open the shop is because of your
donations.
So it would never have been able to happen without you guys helping us out.
So if you don't want to become a patron, but you want to donate to the pod for like a one-time, you can still through the PayPal.
Exactly. And we have those links on our Facebook page, but again, it's paypal.me/creepitreal. Also, you know, we have our shop is open, and I know that a bunch of people are starting to get their shirts and they're posting them. Shy got hers. It looks awesome. We're super jazzed by how good they look, so don't miss out on that.
Yeah. After I washed it too, again, I washed it on cold, inside out, dried it low heat. It came out softer than when it was delivered. So it's a super comfy shirt. No.
Mm-hmm. And beautiful.
And beautiful.
So, okay. I think that's it. So,
yeah.
Yep. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting us. We love you. And we'll see you next. This might actually be Shy's last. This is actually, I think it is, isn't it? I think it's Shy's last. This is going to be her last episode for the year. I think we're going to do one more. I'm going to do one more episode before our second season starts. But this is Shy's last one for the year.
For the year. Mm-hmm. I got stuff happening, people.
Got big things going on.
But
we'll be back in January with Shy again. So don't fret. So anyway, okay. Well, all right. We'll see you later. Creep it real.
Bye.